right, thank you very much. Welcome back, guys, after lunch. Last day. I know it's been a intensive 3 days. I hope everybody had fun last night. This room looked a little bit different last night than right now. And we are here for the last session. And we always save the best for the last. So this is going to be the great session of the conference. So let me first introduce our first speaker. There are 3 speakers in this panel. There are 3 wonderful talks this session. The first speaker is Dr. Rania Khalaf, who I introduced once before, but let me tell a little bit more about Rania before I bring her up here. So Rania, I met Rania when she was an undergrad. She was an intern at IBM Research. I was the manager of the group, actually, that she came and joined. And then eventually when she graduated, she did this combined master's and bachelor's program at MIT, finished and joined IBM Research. And by the time I sent her the job offer, then after that I went back to Sri Lanka. And I was still running the team, but I was living in Sri Lanka. So when she first joined, I quickly left. But so we never really, we worked together, but we were not in the same place. And then Rania went on to being a fantastic leader in IBM Research. She was heading IBM's AI engineering unit in research. She was a distinguished scientist there and has contributed to many, many things in IBM that we know about and don't know about. And then left IBM a few years ago to join a ag tech company where she was CIO and CDO, working on sort of consuming AI and technology and trying to bring it to a completely different domain and having impact through that. And so after a very long time, so I've known her for 25 years now, after a very long time, finally managed to get her to come and work with us. And she joined last year, and in the last few months, we have done an incredible amount of work. All the work that you saw coming out around AI was coalesced together in a very, very short time, and then it was with Rania's leadership that we were able to pull it all together. And she is now heading WSO2's AI work as Chief AI Officer. So it's a ultimate pleasure for me to welcome Rania. She's a wonderful person and very, very deep person and doesn't give up, will argue with me all the time. I've been doing that for 25 years, so nothing new. But I think it'll be a wonderful speech that we will listen to. Welcome, Rania.
Thank you, Sanjeeva. Thank you, everybody. I hope we're full of energy. Everyone had lunch. I didn't want to get between people and lunch, so I'm happy to see everyone is back. So we've heard a lot about AI throughout the conference. We opened out with a keynote laying out the vision we have for WSO2's AI journey and how we see it. So we're going to bring that back together today and putting together some of the sessions we heard and just look at a little more about what is happening in this space and what it means for all of us. So, there's this, it feels like the moment for AI is now. Of course, this is, there's been several AI winters. In my undergraduate times, I worked with Marvin Minsky and Patrick Winston, and, that was, then there was a long AI winter. I worked for Sanjeeva, and I told him I wanted to build a robot, and he's like, no, IBM does not do that. So, but now we really see with computing getting much more capable, and with data being much more accessible, and especially with the advent of foundation models that made it possible for anybody to be able to use and adapt AI for their needs and their use cases, we are, again, in this moment where we're seeing a lot of potential value from these technologies. And somebody once said that, once AI is being used, it doesn't feel like AI anymore. We just feel that it's just not the magic and stuff that just works. But we've been using AI for a very long time, right? There is stuff in Waze and Google Maps, talking to Siri, even when it only could do very simple commands, that is speech to text, text to speech, all of these capabilities, right? And now with generative AI, we're seeing another wave where now that the machines are able to also generate content and generate potentially new content and perform tasks through agents, it's opening up a whole new door of capabilities. So it sounds very exciting. In my view, I am not an apocalyptic person because I'm in the AI space. I like to be hopeful. I like to think that this is opening up doors. It's enabling things that were not possible before so we can have a more enriching future on the planet, with the planet, and with machines, right? So just a quick poll around the room. How many people have used some form of generative AI? Super. How many of you have built an application that calls out to some generative AI. All right, great. So about 10%, 20% maybe? It's hard to see you. I have the light in my face. Anyone played around with agents, building agents? Okay, a few less. That's very new. And again, the big joke now is there was this article that said, like, what the hell's an agent? Because, you know, it means a lot of things to many people, but we're starting to see some agent frameworks crop up again, and they've been quite useful. So with that, let's take another look at what's happening in AI. So it's fantastic. There's a lot going on. There's a ton of money being invested. There's a ton of capability. If I read a paper every day, I think I'd have to read 1,000 academic papers a day to try to keep up with the rate of and pace of innovation, right? There were 80 large models released last year. Actually, 88 is the exact number. These are large models, not like smaller ones. These are very expensive to train, et cetera, et cetera. And GitHub, this is a cumulative number. It's not an annual number. But and I think this number was from 2023. There's nearly 2 million AI projects in GitHub now, right? So this sounds fantastic. And we like to think we're riding the wave and consuming all the benefits. But really, what's happening, I don't know about you guys, but some days, you know, it feels like this. Like, there's just so much. So much. It's happening. It's at a breakneck speed, and just trying to keep up with all these changes and knowing what's new. By the time you learn it, it's old, and now a new thing has come up. We've never seen something like this go this fast. What ChatGPT did by going online and putting itself in the hands of everybody at a very early stage for technology, and in a way that everyone can consume immediately, this was very different from the days before, where it used to take maybe a year or two to get something into production from when it was first released, right? Now suddenly within 3 months, people are building things on top of things on top of things and using them in the real world. So it's a wonderful way to, a wonderful state and space of change that's happening, but it also can be kind of overwhelming, right? So we like to think that we, as Sanjeeva mentioned in the opening keynote, we like to think that, you know, there's nothing in tech that is really constant as much as change is constant. That has been, the stacks have been changing, the tech has been evolving for as long as it has existed. Maybe not at this crazy breakneck pace, but we like to think like as these patterns emerge and things stabilize, and we can build abstractions around them, we can then bring them to the platform and make them available to you so that you can use them to build things that can give you value today, right? While we stay ahead of what's coming down the line, we're experimenting, we're exploring, and we're bringing to the product the patterns as they emerge. And if someone tells you they have it figured out or they're done with the AI platform or then you should know not to believe them because everything is, you know, new models are emerging, new types of things are emerging, and something that used to be super important right now, down the line, may not be needed anymore, right? So it's okay. For us, we think that's okay. We will evolve our platform with the evolution of the technology, right? And we're not jumping on the latest hypey thing and, you know, breaking things. We're really doing it in a thoughtful way. And we are also, as you heard, we have our own AI capabilities in our platforms, and we're using our own technology for those. So, you know, we are bringing you something that we have tried and put into production, and we're running it ourselves. So what does it mean to do AI native applications? Because we're saying the modern application is AI native. We expect that applications from here on will have AI inside. Like right now, we expect that applications call APIs. We expect soon that it will be quite common that any application will have AI inside. And we talked about 4 different ways to do that. So if you have your application, you can be interacting with generative AI models. You can be doing that and also grounding them in some local information that's pertinent to your use case or your company and so on, so they can be more concise and more precise. And you can give them tools so they can take action, and this is where we get into the world of agents. And we really see 2 things about agents. So one is agents that are part of an application, like the agents in the WSO2Con app, right? They are inside the Con app. They're not off on their own. And then eventually the agent breaks free from the app, and we start to see a little bit of these agents that have their own identity, potentially their own autonomy, there's a bit of a movement to a future we are imagining where these things become part of the workforce. They are peers and partners that work alongside us. We're not there yet, and I don't want people to hear about that and then be afraid about what it means for them and think, I'm not ready to do that. It's really far away, too many implications. That's fine. We don't have to start there, right? We can start with call an Gen AI model in your application. You can start with do one that calls some simple tools. It doesn't have to go off on its own and do its own actions, but it's deciding in what order to call the tools, how to move the data around, and so on and so forth. So you can start getting advantage of the technology right away. But it's not all so easy, right? Everyone talks about this stuff like, oh, look, 5 clicks and you're done and it's up and running. There are a lot of things we need to think about very carefully when we are building these kinds of systems. So I'm going to touch a little bit about them and about how we have to think about the changing development process and the things that we need to think about before we put these things in production. So Victor Dibia, who was on the panel with me today, was reminding me this morning that even if you build an agent, or even if you build a model, that is a tiny part of the overall thing that builds the value, right? So the logic that has that AI piece, it has to connect to your data. It has to connect to your applications. Potentially, the workflows change, the tools change, the process, the skills. So there are many pieces, both technical pieces on the build side that you have to think about and take care about, and we'll talk about a few of the things that are different between agents and between regular applications. So it's really like we have the agent building piece, but there's also everything around it, of which integration plays a large part, and identity management plays a large part, and data, and so on and so forth. So I really like this picture. We've had a lot of discussions about vibe coding. This is a new term that's come up from Andre Karpathy about, oh, I just talk a little bit, it generates code, and a little bit of talking, a little bit of coding, and the thing is up and running. So building application with natural language or some interactive journey like that, there's a lot of concern that you're building kind of shaky stuff that maybe doesn't fit together so well. It works, but God knows if it will scale, and who knows what's really happening under the hood. There's a lot of anxiety around that. But what does that really mean? I really think that what's happening here is we're shifting the focus from a lot of work in creating something, like creating the code or creating an essay, if you're doing natural language generation for writing a paper, and shifting more of the time we are spending and the energy we need to put into the validating and the monitoring phase. So in traditional software, we used to talk about testing, unit testing, etc. So for these kind of non-deterministic, stochastic steps in our process that you call it twice, it doesn't do the same thing, we have to think about how do we move from testing to what's known as eval, which is test plus, plus, plus. And we need to be able to validate that what you're generating meets our quality requirements. It should do what it thinks it does, so it should run and pass some test criteria. But also we might have some governance rules. It may need to be meeting some quality of service and some sniff tests, right, of what we think it should do. So we really believe the developer in the loop is still very much a thing, right? This is making them faster, but they are checking the code, hopefully, before they are checking it in, and they are accountable. There is a human accountable to the quality of the work that's being generated by the AI. And then when these things are up and running, it's going to become very important to monitor them, because they may deteriorate, right? With code, usually you build it once, and it does the same thing over and over and over again. With these Gen AI models, as the input might change a little bit, or some data might come in that hasn't seen before, or maybe the provider changed something in their model and what used to work stopped working, all that is possible. So you need to be monitoring all the time, and if your model starts deteriorating in terms of the quality of the value it's providing, you need to then take some action. And in the old days, it used to be the action is open a ticket, fix a bug, change a line of code, do a test, redeploy. With these models, it's not like that, right? You might go change a prompt or do some retraining. Who knows what regression testing means then? Like, how do you know you didn't break some other thing, right? So we are still developing the processes and the tools and the things around those pieces. Even though you can call them with an API like any other piece of code, they don't behave like deterministic pieces of code. Then I'm going to spend a bit of time on responsible AI, because that's been coming up a lot. And this comes up both in the, when you are using copilots and assistants and so on, for whoever the provider is that's building them for you has to think about these things, as well as you when you're using these capabilities, that you should be aware of some of the shortcomings or challenges that they face. And we see 6 axes that responsible trust is defined as. Different people have different definition, and I look like we need a software update. Can we tell it we don't want to do it right now? We could, but I don't want to do it without my slides. Who's controlling the machine? Yeah, thank you. All right. So, decoding trust was a paper and a benchmark that won the Best Paper Award at NeurIPS. NeurIPS is the biggest academic conference in AI and one of the most prestigious and difficult to get into. This was a wonderful paper that was not only describing the 6 areas of responsible AI, but they also had a benchmark so models could be tested against them. And they talk about 6 areas, and I'll give you some examples about a few of them to kind of give a flavor of the kinds of issues that these models have and the kinds of implications and things we need to be aware of. So let's start with robustness. When deep learning was kind of in its earlier days, there was a very famous example of adversarial robustness. It was called, that was a way to hack the deep learning model and trick it. And in that example, they were talking about self-driving cars, and they had a stop sign. Anyone here familiar with that stop sign example? It was really famous. All right, so it was a stop sign, and what they did was, if they put a post-it note on the stop sign, then the self-driving whatever model would think that it's a go, not a stop, right? So it looks like a stop sign, but the model sees a different thing. It sees whatever the hacker wants it to see, because they change a few pixels, and the code is reading pixels, not looking at a picture, really, and it would get hacked. So here's an example that's closer to what we know today, ChatGPT, Claude, etc. In this example, these models have been what's called, there's a fancy word that doesn't mean anything very exciting, alignment. It just means you're trying to align the model to human values, and that's stopping it from doing harmful things. The model, as you know, is just using probabilities to generate what's the next sentence, what's the next word, whatever. So you have to kind of stop it from doing bad things, like teaching people how to do mass murder or build a bomb or destroy humanity. And there's been many, so you can, the way that you prompt it, you can trick it to go outside of its guardrails. And what you see here at the bottom, it looks like gibberish, but that was an algorithm that this team created that can work with any model and get it to do bad things, right? So these are some things that we are seeing, that even if with the best intention of the model provider, there are still ways to break these models. And just like in normal code, how we have people doing ethical hacking, trying to understand how these things work, there's a lot of people, there's a whole domain of security of generative AI systems, with people studying it, papers, science, etc. And it's a very active topic. But this is an example of making the model, even though it tries to behave, making it misbehave. I tried that with a WSO2Con app. There's a chat there, assistant, and we have a thing to recommend the people you should meet when you're here. So I asked it, who is the least interesting person I should meet? But it behaved really well. It told me, it gave me a very big lecture that I shouldn't think that people are less interesting than others, and I need to be nicer. So the next area is around privacy. Privacy has come up a lot in our discussions here this week. So this is about private information. These models are hosted by third-party provider in different countries, potentially. How do I think about my data and making sure my data is not leaking and going down the line? So the things that we think about in privacy is, is the model getting data it shouldn't, like private data from my company? Can I trick the model into giving me someone else's private information, their social security number in the US, their phone number, their personal email, etc., things that it shouldn't be giving? Is there a way to get that out of it? And how they work with different privacy-related information. Then there is the topic of fairness. Fairness and bias has been getting a lot of attention since the early days. And there's a lot of information about that and a lot of concerns. A lot of it comes because the bias in the training data, right? So famous examples of this. So this example is saying, if you give the same prompt to the system, but you just change the gender, and you're talking about salary, this model here is biased, right? It thinks the man should be paid more. So then that should fail a test around fairness. And other examples like this include if you, we'll see one in a minute. Aha, this one. Around stereotypes, right? So you have to remember these models are trained on their training data. They know what they see, and if they see a thing a lot, they think that's more likely to happen. They're more likely to spit it out again. So this was from a model called Midjourney, or a tool called Midjourney that generates images. And if you ask it to generate you an influential person, it gives you an old white man. Okay? So this is like reinforcing stereotypes. Now, people might argue that these things are probabilistic and you want an accurate representation of the training data. And then you might argue that that's not cool because there are influential people of all shapes, colors, sizes, countries, nationalities, and maybe agents too, right? So with that, I hope that gives you an idea of what we think about when we talk about responsible AI, and to give you the confidence that there are people, and a lot of people, and a lot of research and investment going into each one of these areas, and these models and the service providers around them and the people using them are thinking about these things, building in the capabilities as they roll off the ground. We see some capabilities out of the Linux Foundation for open source libraries that check for some of these things, and you can do request response mediation with the model interaction with them. Hugging Face, which has a lot of models deployed there, and it's like a place where you can go find many models. They have published an LLM safety leaderboard, and right now, I didn't have that in the screenshot, but today the model that passes, so remember that decoding trust, the 6 areas I showed? The people that published that paper also have a benchmark with running code that you can use against the model to evaluate it against the 6 areas, and you get a score. So Claude right now is the model that has the highest responsibility score. And we're seeing also some regulation that's coming up around the world for these models. The regulation is evolving, and how to implement it is still going to be very interesting because there's a lot of discussion, right, about these regulations and how they can be implemented, and if they're favoring only the big players who have enough money to focus on them, and so on and so forth. But just to let you know that this is an area that is very active, it's evolving, and it should scare us a little bit, but it's okay, and I'll say why in a minute. Then we talked about agents that do stuff. We talked about calling an LLM model. We talked about agents that do stuff. Very recently, there's a new thing agents can do now, which RPAs have been able to do for a while, just not so intelligently, which is press things on your screen and type in the keyboard. So what we saw from that is Anthropic put out did a release of this capability with Claude. And what I found very amusing is they were doing a thing where they were getting Claude to create this retro 90s website. I don't know if anyone built a website in the 90s. I did. I used every animated GIF I could find, and everything was spinning and dancing. But so here's Claude. It's creating this website. It's clicking and typing and doing stuff. And if you go to Twitter, you'll find this post. There's a live video. And in the middle of doing that, it's just like a human in a Zoom meeting when no one's looking. It decides to go browse the internet and look at pictures of Yellowstone National Park. So so these things are having these they're surprising the people who created them. In one case, it also goes and you can see here, it says, it goes and it clicks accidentally on a thing to shut off the screen recording and deleted the video. So they had to start all over. So again, we have to think they're not like the old applications that just do what we tell them. We can assume they're doing what we're told. They're like another person. I'm not going to, I can't say the word, I can't say it. They're not really like a human. They're not as intelligent. They were not there. But we're used to like a coworker might go browse the internet while we're in the meeting with them and no one's looking. And you're used to a friend telling you things that maybe not be quite true, right? So they have these quirks, and we just have to know about them, and if you're aware about them, you can use them responsibly. So the question is, do we wait? Do we wait until all this is solved? Do we wait until they're fully responsible, it's very safe, it's very secure? I don't think so, right? You're already, most of the room here is using these things. We are learning very quickly what's okay to do, what's not okay to do with them. So the idea is just be thoughtful, be aware that these are the limitations that they have, and then think about how can you adopt them in good ways and what use cases they're good for today so you can get value today. And with us, what we're doing is we're bringing a lot of the capability that's maturing to patterns, to the tools we provide, and you want to be ready for the journey ahead. So it's okay, like this field is changing so fast. So it's okay if, today, a few months ago, RAGs were the thing. Now agents are the thing. It's all right, right? Maybe RAGs go away at some point. It's all right again, right? We're going to build what we can to get the value we can. And as the technology change, we evolve with it. We've done this forever. So let's say you're convinced you now want to say, okay, I want to build more of this stuff. I'm ready. What do I do? So I really like this quote from Satya Nadella. It was very recent. And for me, when I think about the space of code for AI, when we say that these things look like normal code, but they don't really behave like regular code right now, I think of this quote. And really, that's what's happening. It's just happening at a speed much faster than we're used to, right? So I don't know, most of us, I hope, were there when cloud showed up. Some of us were there when web services and APIs, came on the scene. The change now is what Satya's saying, and I agree, it's like as if all these things happen at the same time and we have like 3 years to build out all the changes, right? So the whole application stack and the development process are changing, and we're gonna change with it, right? So we talked on Monday, for some of you who were there, about what it takes to build some of these applications. So with agents, as an example, they use generative AI models. You can use our agent framework with our tools, or you can bring your own agents to our tools and use them. You can call third-party Gen AI models. You can add a knowledge base. You can give the agent tools to call so it can take actions. And we are giving it an identity, and so you can do delegation, authentication, etc. So to do that, you build, connect, orchestrate, and deploy with Ballerina Integrator, Devant, Choreo. You can govern and guardrail through the gateway. Today it's doing some things. We keep adding to that to let you do more and more responsible use of the models you have and govern them. And for the APIs, we want to say, okay, if I have APIs under API management, can I make them available as tools for agent? What does that mean? How does it become easy? And finally, we give them identities so that you can use tokens, so they can use tokens, so that they can get the tokens they need to do the work that's asked of them and that they're allowed to do. We also talked about natural programming. This is bringing natural language and programming together. As computers can now read, understand, and execute natural language as well as code, we've been thinking a lot about what that means for the software development lifecycle as a whole and for code in specific. So we had a lovely talk from Mariam earlier today where she was describing this. In a high level, it's about keeping your business requirement, technical documents, and code in sync, because now we can check what they do and see if they match and alert you when they're not matching. And it's also about using natural language inside your code. So the body of a function can be in English or language of your choice, depending how well those models do. And the idea here is that compile time, this changes to code. But I think the more interesting part is that at runtime, this is executed by the large language model. So you can think that the LLM is the interpreter for this piece of code. And the idea is you're not going to do this for everything. You're going to do this for things that are much easier to do in natural language, like summarize some text and see if the person who wrote it is angry, right? That's horrible to do in regular code. You don't want to do it with an if then else and parse the thing, right? You want to give it to a GPT model and let it give you back a response. But things like do some math, calculate some numbers, you don't want to do that in English because frankly it sucks. So you want to do it in code. So we let you mix and interleave those. We also had a couple of sessions on getting hands-on in the AI lab. We had quite a large turnout, so thank you. About 70 or so people came to those sessions and built some agents with us using our tools. We also took you through how we built the WSO2Con application and tried some things out. And Malit gave a lovely talk earlier today about what it takes to go from proof of concept to production. And we saw around the day around the whole conference about how we're adding AI, what we call AI for code, so AI for you to be faster using our products across our whole portfolio. And there, whatever, for the things that we sell and the things you use with us, there are many areas where, people don't want to read documentation anymore and do 5 million clicks. They just want to, if there's a way that I say what I want and it helps me to do it, that's a much faster path. So there we are injecting wherever we can and wherever we find it useful and we hear from you that it would be helpful, then we're adding that into our products, and we see that across VS Code, across the console, and so on and so forth. And finally, Mifan also talked yesterday, I believe, about vertical AI. And there the idea is, we showed you all these general purpose technologies, and we're also adding, I believe we look at 2 sectors now, fintech and healthcare, and we're adding some building blocks that are specialized for those on top of what we already have, right? So this is really how we see it. This was animating, like it's a cycle. So code for AI is how what Satya Nadella was talking about, like how does the application stack and the programming models and so on change so that I can build with AI and feel confident that these programs will do what they're supposed to do. AI for code is about injecting AI into all the software development tools and processes to make you faster, better, etc. And this is a lovely cycle because one feeds the other. As one evolves, the other needs to learn about it, and round and round we go. So some advice to get started. I think the best advice I have is just get hands-on, because these things are now easily accessible to anyone. You don't have to be like a mega coder. You don't have to do fancy things. You can just use them. And the more you play around with them, the more you'll get a sense for what they can do and what they're good at and what they really, really are not good at, right? So really do that. Stuff is coming down all the time. You hear about something new, see if you can play with it. Specialize for your domain. There's a lot of value that's coming from people specializing for the problem that they are in. I believe that's where a lot of value is going to be created. There's quite a few companies now with large valuations that are doing, solutions like AI for the legal domain or AI for healthcare. So the more you bring in your industry's special expertise or your company's special knowledge and information and layer it into these AI to make your company faster, better, safer, it's going to be great. Another piece of advice is be careful, because AI is not a tech problem. It is an all-company problem, right? Everybody has to be on board. The AI alone does nothing. It has to integrate into a process, into a workflow. Everyone has to buy into the value. They have to agree of what will happen if you do take something to production. Do the people consuming it agree to change their workflow to accommodate it? And just proceed with eyes open. It's okay. You do what you can along the way. And we talked a bit about the shortcomings. You know about them. Let's see what we can build with value today. And the stuff that's not ready, just don't do it, right? Like when cloud came about, we're talking to a lot of banks, and it's like, your core banking is in the mainframe. Don't move that to the cloud. Like that was early days where it was really unstable to do that. But you can build your mobile app experience in the cloud and leave your core banking in the mainframe. The same here. We're not saying everything's going to be natural language and we're going to ditch deterministic code. No, right? But there are some things that are just delightful and new and we couldn't do them before, so let's do those. And with that, I will just leave you with this thought that we're really thinking about how do you take AI and not treat it like a shiny, glittery thing on the side that I'm trying to kludge in to my stable, more maybe steady going enterprise infrastructure, but how do we really unroll that yarn and weave it into the fabric of what we do to really bring the whole organization and the humans that use it and uplift them, right? So with that, I'll close here, and I thank you all very much for being here. Have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.